Well, hello and welcome to the next mysterious episode of Tree Lady Talks. And I say mysterious because, well, there's a lot of stuff going on this week, isn't there? There's a lot of good things have happened. I mean,
it's been a really good news week.
Yeah, it has been a good news week. I mean, we've landed on Mars. Which is great news. Bad news because unfortunately we couldn't fill in the application form properly to colonise another planet, and I think that they noticed that we didn't fill in the bit about the history of previous colonisations of other planets, so we probably won't get anywhere on that score. The vaccinations are going well, so I mean we're all going to be vaccinated by, I don't know, June the 21st. I mean, don't try and get to Stonehenge for heaven's sake, because you won't get anywhere near the place. And this episode is all about saving a horse chestnut tree.
If you're feeling vulnerable or worried for your day, we know she interviews the best. From Santa Fe to Dungeness, from mental health to happiness, Tree Lady talks to you today.
Well, this is a project that we worked on as a company. We got involved late on and there was a problem, and we had the open-mindedness of the developer, the passion and open-mindedness of the local community, and the appliance of science.
Spoiler alert.
It's still there.
And just in case anybody's interested, Mark Hood, who is the Green Councillor for Tonbridge and Malling Borough Council, he's one of them, there are two, said at the end of his interview,
I'm looking forward to hearing what sound effects are intertwinkle this episode.
And I can just tell you, I'm not going to fall for any of that stuff, all right? So don't think there's going to be any space. Okay, so who are we going to be hearing from first, Sharon?
We're going to be hearing from Johnathan Webb and Claire Rick from Assura, who are a specialist construction company for healthcare. Then we're going to speak to the building company who actually built it, and then there's a conversation between Ian Lee and I regarding the technical things that we did.
Oh yeah, a bit of tree radar, love. See what I've done there? They redeveloped the site of a disco in the 70s. Oh, come on, keep up.
And then we're going to talk to Charlotte and her two boys, Jojo, age 10, and Danny, age 12. Oh, it's so great to hear from young people about why they care and they're so passionate. Then we have an in-depth chat with Councillor Mark Hood about why the tree was important and the direct action they took to save it.
Johnathan Webb and Claire Rick.
Tell us about Assura, Claire.
Assura is a national primary care premises specialist. So we're based up in the northwest in Warrington, but we operate all over the country. We look after just under 600 primary care buildings. So some of them, most of them are GP, surgery and medical centre buildings, but we also own buildings that offer services like diagnostics and treatment, and NHS support offered from our buildings all over the country. There are around 80 of us. Most people are based in the office in Warrington in normal times. And then we do have team members who are all over the country.
And John, tell us about this particular project. What were you trying to build?
We were trying to build in this project a new build GP surgery for Tonbridge Medical Group. So that's a group of GPs in Tonbridge, in Kent. They serve over 15,500 patients at last count and provide general medical services to them under an NHS banner. So your typical GPs. The GPs here historically operated from 3 buildings in Tonbridge. 2 of those are converted houses, and another one was a building that was condemned a few years beforehand, but then none of them were fit for purpose, and they put limitations on the services that the GPs could provide to their growing list size. So we were working with Tonbridge Medical Group, as we do with GPs across the UK, to provide them new purpose-built replacement premises because their existing surgeries were outdated and undersized.
What was the original use of the site and what was it like?
The building that now houses Tonbridge Medical Group was previously known and quite fondly regarded locally as the Teen and 20 Club. So it was owned by Tonbridge and Malling Borough Council, and it was a disused facility by the time that we'd identified it as being suitable for the provision of a new GP practice. The issue with the building and plot size is that it's actually probably typically a lot smaller than what we would develop on for a building of this size. So we needed a few unique design features in order to make sure that we could fit all the space on site.
it's right next to the park, isn't it? The River Lawn Green Park.
That's right. It's River Lawn Road. So it, as the name kind of says, it's between some green space and also next to the river that runs through Tonbridge. But it was a brownfield regeneration project for us. So it's a building that we had to, first of all, demolish before, once we had planning consent, in order to build a replacement facility.
And on the boundary of the site were a number of trees as well, including the horse chestnut tree, which is the subject of this podcast. Tell us when you were first aware that there was going to be a problem.
The project for us was one that got a lot of local interest from an early stage. And I think that for us is also something that's not uncommon. We're providing replacement NHS facilities for the NHS. There's 15,500 patients that be seeing their GP on this building, and actually that translates to about 100,000 patient contacts per year. The average person sees the GP about 6.5 times per year at the moment, albeit there is no such thing as the average person, so that varies a lot. So there was always going to be a lot of public interest, and something that we did as part of the planning applications, we always would be to assess the site and its suitability. So we needed to do that for planning purposes, but also when we as a company will design and construct and then own the building, that when it's finished, we needed to make sure that the site was suitable from that area as well. And that's when we first came across the tree, the horse chestnut tree, along with another number of other trees. But it was always something that from when we first saw the site and saw the existing Teen and 20 club as was, it was always on our kind of radar, to excuse the pun, Sharon, that it's something that we knew was going to be something we needed to look at in a lot of detail and follow all the right routes through.
And actually the planning consent, this was before I got involved, actually showed that tree to be removed, didn't it? Even though it's actually owned by the local authority, and they gave their consent for it to be removed, not only as a planning authority, but also as landowner. And then what happened? Well,
yeah, you're right. The tree was assessed as being in poor physical condition, and it had bleeding canker, as I understand it, so that the arboricultural assessments that we had carried out before submitting planning and that were put to the tree officers and everything else and assessed in the right, true and proper way did say that it was a tree that should be removed due to its adjacency to the new build and just due to its lack of suitability for being retained in the longer term. So there were trees at the back of the site that had root protection zones identified that we had to work within. But yeah, going forward, it was something that we knew that was that we had all relevant permissions to remove as part of the planning consent.
And Claire, when did you become aware that lots of people were interested in this tree?
I guess it was really when we got to the point of preparations beginning really at the site itself for the demolition and build. We started receiving communication from people, and certainly then when the work to actually remove the tree was due to begin, it was on that day that we got a call. I mean, actually, it's probably John who got a call, so should pick up that particular memory.
We knew that this was a scheme that had a lot of local interest, but the passion for the tree really came through upon when it became apparent that the tree was going to be removed. I think the idea of having something on a plan and being approved, it becomes reality when people turn up on site or plan to turn up on site and safely and properly remove trees in accordance with all of the consents. And it was then at that point that the day that we had the tree removal plan, when I got a call first thing in the morning telling us that the locals were particularly passionate about keeping the tree, and that we knew we needed to change our approach at that point, because cracking on and just continuing and not listening to anyone and doing what we had consent to do, for some people would be the right thing to do, but for us it's about really listening and assessing the options and being open-minded about what to do next, because you'll be speaking to people involved on this from another perspective, and our view is that ultimately we needed to play any situation that came before us, and as a developer, when we get presented with problems, we immediately focus on the solutions rather than dwelling on what's happened. It's what can we do to overcome that.
I really got a sense of that, because you reached out to our company and saying, we've got this problem and there's nothing I like more than a problem I can try and solve. And so later on in this podcast, I'll be talking to my former colleague Ian Lee about the approach that we took. One of the things I kept asking you, because I found this so refreshing, is have you really got an open mind? Are you prepared to spend quite a bit of money on treatments, investigations, and really to sort of try and deal with this? And if necessary, for us to meet one of the protesters on site, which indeed we did do the first day. What implications did this have for you as a company from a public relations perspective?
This reached the national papers. They were following the story as a story of community passion, I guess. And, I think for us, of course, it's never a decision that you want to take, actually, removing a tree necessarily. This is never a decision that anyone takes lightly. But for us, it's always sort of taking expert advice on these things. So we, as you were saying, we came to you guys really for right, what's the next right thing we can do here? It was trying to get the expert opinion on what our options were, because what was coming through so clearly was that there was such community feeling about this. We certainly weren't going to ignore that.
No, that was really came across, and well, it's not a spoiler alert, but we did manage to save the tree by doing various investigations, and then Ian went on to supervise it during construction. It's all finished now, isn't it? So people are in the building, is that right?
Yeah, we're really pleased with the project. It's added a huge amount of extra capacity to the NHS at a really strong time and need, and GPs are now in happy practicing, seeing patients. And it's been something that continued throughout construction during the COVID issues that we continue to have. And as a scheme, we think it looks great, but importantly, it's something that the GPs are providing a much bigger kind of social impact to the health services. And if you compare that to where the GPs have come from and where they are now in our building as our tenant and as our long-term property partner, we're all delighted with the final product. And the tree, as you rightly say, is still standing proud and is actually quite a prominent feature on the scheme, and something that I don't think we should be shying away from. It's something that actually has is seeing us respond to the community request and to deal with it in the right way, though, not just kind of paying lip service to something. We had to look at a lot of options, but by the time we approached you, Sharon, it was something that we knew we needed to deal with it with an open mind and focus on solutions with. We'd been approached by the pressure group to meet, and we'd had a number of approaches kind of online and otherwise, and we agreed to meet, but we didn't want to go there and just listen and tell them we'd do something. We wanted to go there with a solution that was fully worked out and reasoned. And for the team that I work in, we manage developments and always overcome these issues, but it's always about dealing with things in the right way, doing the right thing, taking the proper advice, going through established routes and processes, and then at the end of it, coming up with a reasoned solution that can mean that you keep as many people happy as possible, but we also need to tell people what we can do and what we can't do with the scheme. And here, what we can't do was important as well as what we could do. What we didn't want to do was delay or frustrate or negate the development of the new medical centre, which had been long overdue in the eyes of the many local people. But at the same time, we needed to make sure that the tree and the views that had been put forward were fully listened to, and a solution had been explored, which wasn't the removal of the tree that we first thought would happen, and that we'd been kind of just understood in quite black and white terms as something that would need to take place.
And because of that openness, we did carry out a tree root radar survey. We carried out our own visual tree inspections, instigated a root treatment of biochar and decompaction on the park side. And we had regular site supervision and really detailed, precise tree surgery. But it could have gone the other way. It really depended on where the roots were. And because of the T&20 building and where the underground services were, it effectively created a trench, historically, where the new building went. So in some ways we were lucky. I got the feeling that the protesters would have really listened if we'd have gone back and said, actually, the roots are going all over the place where we're going to build, and it just can't happen. It's just too close. I think having that dialogue, and as we carried out the site supervision, with your permission, I tweeted about it, and then the Keep River Lawn Green kept sort of seeing what we were doing, and there was a real feeling of transparency. From my point of view, it's an absolute pleasure to work on this project. In fact, a real pleasure to work on that project.
I think it's useful to discuss, Sharon, that we kind of had a lot of faith in the system and the technology that you had. I think that it's for us, it wasn't saying we'd save the tree, it's doing all that we could and having trust in you as arboriculturalists to follow the advice to the letter of the law and completely, and see what would happen. We weren't saying we were saving the tree. I think for us, it was saying that we would do everything we can to see if it could be retained. And it's that transparency and trust that I think that we had, or the open-minded approach that we were trying to kind of make sure was reciprocal of people otherwise, whether that's our building contractors, GPs, or in this case, Keep River Lawn Green, to make sure that we all understood quite clearly what was going to happen and what would be assessed.
Yes, that's right. It's using professional people at the right time and having an open mind. So we are always championing on this podcast, get the right profession in at the right time and really listen and share information. And we work closely with your structural engineers and your builder as well. And that made a big difference. So it was a really good team working approach. You had to make some changes, didn't you, really? Once we carried out the tree survey, looked at where the roots were, mapped the crown extent, etc. There were some minor modifications.
You're right. I think for us it was a bit of a journey into the unknown about could we actually retain the building design in its current form once we had the full details of the surveys that you carried out. So there's some quite extensive changes to the substructure of the building and to the foundation grid. So we had a kind of a capped piling solution in one part of the site. We had to increase some of the levels of treatment to some of the external elevations that would be nearer to some of the canopy as well, and also had to change some of the car parking details too, to make sure that we could work with the tree in situ. And that's not just in the short term, but during the construction side of the project as well, where I know you'll be speaking to Jenna's on that, but there had to be some quite careful considerations, and us acting as client and end owner and long-term partner with the GPs, we wanted to make sure that was done completely in accordance with your surveys and also reports, but knowing that the Keep River Lawn Green colleagues that were working on this would also be looking at it every step of the way, and quite rightly, it was the public interest just wasn't going to cease because we'd agreed a technically led solution.
One of the things we did was we spun a pile cap 90 degrees and had it raised above the ground between car parking spaces, and it just looks like a low wall. It actually worked really, really well. And making those changes, it took a lot of time as a team to go through those details, and but it really did work in the end, and it's very tight, but it looks good. So what we'll do is we're going to share a photograph on our website of the finished tree and building. This has been a really interesting journey for all of us, for me technically, but also for you to really demonstrate your ethics as a company. What do you feel about how this project has taken you and really explored what these things mean for your company and encapsulate that?
I'm not sure there had ever been a project with so much passion about one particular thing. And, you know, for us, we'd obviously taken advice originally during the planning stage, and, you know, we'd kind of gone, right, that's the advice for the professionals, okay. What we sort of learned, I think, through this, you know, sort of period was particularly that we like to ask again. You know, if there's a question being put to us by, you know, lots of very sensible people, we want to know, well, is there another way? Is there another way that we could come at this? And that was why, you know, we came to you guys, and we very much wanted to be able to sort of meet with the group and be honest and say we are going to look at this. You know, we want to do the right thing, and if there's a way that we can help and do this differently, we would like to.
As a company, we're all about listening, and one of our values is doing what we say we're going to do. So we've got to be playing things with a straight bat, but also trusting in a process and trusting in the individuals that are advising us, and managing expectations in the right way. And that's, I think, we've learned from the project and from this kind of specific instances and relating to the tree, that actually you can, with the right advice, overcome issues and find a way that gives people kind of faith in the system that we are as a developer and long-term investor, somebody that will listen and be genuinely open-minded. It's not a case of a lot of developers in different aspects might have a negative approach or not listen. We kind of set ourselves out because of working in the health sector, and that's exclusively what we do. We realize that we have to look at problems rather than look at solutions that overcome problems, because if we focus on the other things, then we will always be challenged.
Fundamentally, we're all human beings at the end of the day here, and people just appreciate the chance to be heard and have a conversation. And, you know, that has definitely been something that we've drawn from this even more. We've always tried to be a business that listens and consults really deeply, and this has certainly taught us even more about that, and we've certainly tried to apply it.
John, honestly, if ever there was a time to have a beautiful, light and airy functioning GP practice, it's right now in the pandemic. And a lot of our discussions we're having more generally for the podcast is how trees improve our well-being, how even seeing a tree outside the window, if you're a patient looking out, has a calming effect and a calming effect on the overworked doctors. Have you had any feedback from people who work or use that practice on it's just pleasant to see some greenery?
The GPs are over the moon with the new facility. Comparing it with where they've come from, I think for a lot of them, it's been staggering to see it turn into reality. They have consulting rooms overlooking the river, quite close to a number of, green areas and trees. And I think that's important for them as clinicians, especially in this current moment in time, but also for patients too. We have quite a large waiting room with the dual aspect approach on the first floor level that it just gives a certain level of kind of serenity to people waiting in these facilities. It's important when people visit GP surgeries that in the future that they're comfortable and we do everything we can to reduce anxiety. And that's not just the design, it's the siting of them in locations adjacent to green areas as well.
And has that changed your site selection, or is that too much of a difficult question to answer?
Our site selection is something that is unique to each and every project, and it's probably one of the trickiest parts of what we do as a job. I think it has changed our approach to actually how we use the green space we have within our buildings. We've quite recently put in community allotments to a number of facilities, for example, and social prescribing, which Claire might want to go in a bit more detail, is a key part of our strategy at Assura too. So it's harnessing the power of the outside space in a scheme rather than just looking at it going through into the waiting room and seeing the reception desk. I think the kind of patient experience has moved on and there's a lot more than that now.
Yeah, it's something we sort of have a lot of feedback on from pieces of research that we've done with organisations like the Patients Association on what people feel when they can't see outside of a healthcare building. There is something about having that connection with the outside space while you're in a place where maybe you are feeling pretty anxious, you're dreading some news you're about to get or whatever it might be. And so it is, that sort of connection to outside space and even involving external spaces within healthcare buildings is something we've been looking at an awful lot. And, certainly, the experiences that we had in Tonbridge, I think only serve to underline just how strongly people feel about that. And if we can reflect that in how buildings are designed for the future, that can only be a good thing.
And I think that what we also have a piece of work we're looking at, which is a bit of future gazing, but what will a medical centre look like in 2030? And there's some more details on our website, and we're refreshing some of our plans because they're 12 months old and it's aged quite a lot. But one of the things that stayed actually is really that outside space and incorporating it within a design part of the patient journey, part of the clinical journey, and using it to really get a bit more of a focus. So when people come to GP surgeries, it's not just about feeling ill, it's actually about being well and helping them to access a lot more services than would otherwise be useful, which a lot of them are to do with social prescribing, using outdoor space, and that impact on mental health and well-being is more important than ever. And a building where you're sat in to see a GP when you're not feeling well it shouldn't necessarily be a building that is completely utilitarian and functional. It's got to interact with the outside space a lot more.
Bob Garlinge.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and the company you work for.
Well, I've been in the building industry for 33 years now. I've always worked for main contractors, and I've been working for general contractors for the last 11 years as a contracts manager, which means I oversee multiple sites at any one time and have staff on the site actually doing the work for me.
And have you worked on many sites with trees on them before where you've had to carry out some really special working?
I've probably worked on about 5 for those sort of sites in the last 12 years.
This particular site was a bit different, wasn't it? Because works were due to go ahead and then local people became very concerned. How did that affect your operations?
It didn't directly affect us. It was more the client preparing the site so we could commence work. So until there was an agreement in place with the conservationist, we couldn't actually commence work on the building site.
How did you find operationally working so close to a tree and all the site supervision visits that had to be made by Ian, the arboriculturalist? How did that work out for you as a builders?
It worked out a lot better than I thought it would. Obviously, because the tree was so close to the building, as you say, there was a no-dig zone, so we couldn't touch anything in the ground base of the tree underneath the canopy. So foundations had to be cantilevered out in that direction and laid on top of the ground surface. We also had to have tree protection fencing in place to prevent anyone getting too close to the tree. And the scaffold had to be very narrow, again, to stop us getting too close to the tree. Fortunately, we were allowed to cut the tree back before work commenced, so that did keep the branches away while we did the work.
And how was it communicated to your people on the ground actually doing the work?
But when anyone new starts on the site, they have a toolbox talk and an induction, and on there would be a standard information about what they can and can't do on the site. And that would include, of course, don't go anywhere near that tree, don't move the fence in, mustn't dig anywhere near that. Just making sure they're aware of what's going on. Excellent.
And were there any surprises for you as a building company working with this tree? Did you learn anything new?
I don't think so, no. Well, not personally, no. I mean, it's all things I've done in the past. I suppose the only new thing is that on this one, of course, there were people chained to the tree before we started. That's different.
Yeah, that's right. So there were people chained to the tree, but as you say, by the time you got on, we'd all reached a happy agreement about that.
Yes.
Overall, are you happy with the project?
Yes, yeah, very happy. I mean, all projects had their difficulties, and of course, we had COVID in this situation, which really did delay the work. But as far as the tree was concerned, it all worked out quite nicely in the end. We managed to work with the tree.
Well, thank you. I know that Ian really enjoyed working with you, and it's a great team experience. So thank you very much.
And likewise, thank you.
Ian Lee.
So Ian, tell us about this horse chestnut tree. Can you describe it to the listeners when you first saw the tree?
So the tree is a large mature horse chestnut growing on the edge of an open grass triangle in the middle of Tonbridge. It's one of several trees of approximately even age. So there's another horse chestnut located immediately to the west of the tree, a line of lime trees growing along the edge of the river, and Norway maples within the grass itself. To the south of the tree, you had the old Teens and Twenties community centre, which I believe Noel knows about from past incarnations. And River Lawn Road itself runs along the east of the site. The tree is around about a metre from the original boundary of the site, and is under the ownership of Tonbridge Malling Council. It was originally described as having several infestations of bacteria and viral vectors.
Yes, because it had Phytophthora bleeding canker, from which it had mostly recovered, because I think an earlier survey found that to be quite extensive. But when we looked at it, it still had the bleeding canker, but there were some callus growth, wasn't there? It was sort of in some stage of recovery.
From the Phytophthora, it's actually one of the best examples I've seen of a tree recovering from such an infection. Previous thinking on Phytophthora was it was a sort of progressive disease which would cause girdling of the bark, eventually causing limb death and pressure to remove the tree. Yeah,
that was the thinking, and that did happen, didn't it, about 10 to 15 years ago, but it's largely been a picture of improvement, and that's the case with this tree. And also the horse chestnut had its usual sort of horse chestnut leaf minor, speckling the leaves, but nothing too significant. The structural form wasn't too bad, was it?
No, the structural form of the tree is relatively good, actually. It's a single stem tree to around about 2.5, 3 metres in height. And then it forks out into, I think it's 3 limbs, all equally sharing the load of the crown. It was originally a complete full crown on the tree, and it was complemented by a second horse chestnut immediately to the west. From an amenity point of view, its location within the grass was fantastic. And as we carried on working with the site, we found that it had a much more community-based aspect to it as well, rather than just aesthetic. Its value to the community was really brought forward and sort of emphasised to us and to the wider design team. And that was really the driving force as to why we ended up getting involved with it.
That's right, because when we first went to see the tree, which was in December 2018, we had a bit of trouble looking at the bark entirely because it was surrounded in ribbons and handmade signs about saving the tree, because it really became the focus of community attention. We knew that the tree had permission to be removed, both as landowner from the council and also as part of planning permission, but Assura were keen to listen to the community group's concerns. And so we thought, right, what can we find out about this tree? So we carried out a visual tree assessment in great detail. And then we thought, right, on the site side and on the park side, we carried out a tree root radar survey. So we did that together, Ian, but that's gone on to be your company. Tell the listeners about what is tree radar.
Tree radar is a completely non-invasive way of finding out exactly what's going on with the tree roots underneath the ground. In our industry, we generally work on what we think might be occurring, looking at physical features above the ground, your personal experience, and working on the British Standard root protection area, which gives you a circle around the tree. Everyone knows that that's not necessarily where the roots are growing. So we want to know exactly what is going on under the ground. And the radar lets you find this out without actually digging up the tree roots.
And actually, it looks like a funny-looking pram, really, doesn't it? And but certainly when I used to push the radar, I worked with it for many years, people come up and say, "Where's your baby, love?" But we did this survey, didn't we? And was it about every metre we did a scan line?
We looked at it in two different ways. We wanted to look at it in the grassland and on the site side. So on the grass and open area side, we did a series of concentric half circles going out at 1 metre spacings. And we did that out to 15 metres from the trunk of the tree. On the site side, we were much more interested in looking at exactly where the roots were growing in relation to potential building lines. They had consent for a certain way of building it, and we wanted to see would that be possible along the set building lines? And if it wasn't possible in a certain area, if they moved it back slightly, would that be an option? So again, we set it out at metre spacing, starting level with the trunk and moving out to 8 metres from the trunk on the site side of things.
How can we explain how the radar works, the science behind it?
Imagine Time Team. You've seen Tony Robinson and co. with their little trolleys pushing it around. The tree radar is based on the exact same technology. Radar pulses are sent down into the ground in a very tight beam, and the antenna then picks up reflections of things that are coming out of the soil. So the best reflectors of radar are metal and water. And the radar is really looking for reflections of water. Water has a very specific waveform pattern when it reflects radar signals. So as we're going along, it sends down a pulse every 1 centimetre travelled, and it plots the depth of the tree root detection against the distance travelled. And from that, you can get a series of virtual trenches. With the virtual trenches, you can then look at them from above to see where the roots are as an overhead shot, or you can sort of almost put yourself down into a trench. So if you want to build along a certain line, you can almost imagine a virtual trench has been excavated, and you can stand down in the trench and look where the tree roots are poking through the edge of that trench.
And the reason why we mention the water is so that the tree radar picks up live roots. It doesn't pick up dead roots, which are dry. So it picks up all the live roots, and it picks up roots which are thicker than your thumb, which is a catchphrase I used for many years. So really sort of 20 millimetres and above. And so we can really get an idea where the main structural roots are. It doesn't pick up the fine roots. It picks up the main structural roots, and things are developing in that you can get an idea now of root diameter beyond the fact it's as thick as your thumb, can't you?
It's starting to get there with increased research from colleagues across the world. We're constantly feeding back to Tony Micciardi, who invents it and is continuing to develop it. We're doing ground truthing for him all the time with the idea of constantly improving and evolving the algorithm. Because if we can find out exactly how big a root is just from scanning it, it gives us an extra weapon in the arsenal and helps us to make an even better assessment of what the impact of excavations or damage in a certain area might be.
And so with this, I mean, the survey took us a few hours, but actually the analysis takes a day or so, doesn't it, really, to properly do it and write a report. And actually, we found something very helpful on this site, didn't we?
We did. So there was a grass verge on the site side of the tree, and obviously the grass area to the north. To the north, in the open grass area, the tree was rooting to a fantastic extent, but there was evidence of compaction in the upper soils. Again, it was then rooting in the grass area to the south of the tree in this grass verge. Beyond the grass verge, there was an old tarmac area which served the teens and 20s centre. But what we didn't know was underneath that, there were some very large concrete pads. These concrete pads had provided a really effective root barrier. So they were growing up to the concrete pads, but not going beyond it.
Really effective.
You had a few of the very fine roots going over the top of these. But even then, with the suboptimal conditions underneath the tarmac and the physical barrier of these concrete blocks, the tree wasn't really wanting to go that way. So we had a much higher density of tree roots, either within the grass verge, but particularly in the Tonbridge Malling Council owned grass area.
Which always proves the point. Trees will grow where they get their stuff they need with the least effort. So that was really helpful. So we were able to go back to the developer and the architect and say, you actually don't need to make any changes in terms of footprint, which was great news because it had all been approved and it was out to contract. We did then write a detailed arboricultural method statement on how the site will be developed. And we started with tree surgery. You supervised the tree surgeons, didn't you? And they also did something special with the soil.
We did. So in order to facilitate the demolition of the old buildings, the construction of the new building, and to compensate for any potential actions to the crown that we might be undertaking, we recommended various treatments to the tree. The first one was an all-over crown reduction of the tree. This was to reduce the impact of any potential root loss that might be encountered due to the removal of the very large concrete blocks. There was a potential concern that the tree may be using those for physical anchorage. Secondly, we asked for an all-over climbed inspection of the tree to see if we'd missed anything. We got to see it in the winter, but we're still only looking at it from the ground level, and you can't tell what's going on the top of branches or in tight unions. While they were doing that, they were also doing a removal of all the deadwood in the crown, just because people are going to be working underneath it for the construction works. We want to maintain a safe site for everybody. But one of the biggest things we did was, in order to get the scaffolding in, we need to give a 2-metre clearance between the tree and the building line. The building line was around about 3 metres from the tree, so it's actually a very tight site. To do this, we had to take out one of the very large limbs on the south side. This was not what we would normally recommend and wouldn't be in accordance with BS 3998.
Which is a British standard for tree works in the UK.
But we had to balance what would be the best overall. Would it be to keep the tree, not have the doctor's surgery, or to do works we wouldn't normally recommend, but this we really felt was an exceptional circumstances. The very large limb on the south side of the tree was cut back to give 2 metres clearance from the building. It did leave a very large wound, but we'll come back onto that later as to how we've managed that since. We've done all this work to the top of the tree, but obviously we're especially sensitive with using the tree radar to what's going on below the ground. We wanted to have a look there as well. We knew from the results of the radar that actually parts of the site were compacted quite heavily. So we recommended using soil injection of biochar and tree fertilizers. The idea of this was to rebalance the structure of the soils which have been compacted. The biochar is completely inert and just goes in there. Imagine it's like just holding your place in line. It stops people crushing in and it stops everything being filled back in. You get more movement of water, more movement of air, and it really just helps the establishment and maintenance of the root structures underground.
It also acts as sponges, as micro habitats for the soil, good microbes and everything. So it really helps supporting the tree's immune system. So we did that, and then work started on site. So I looked back at our records, Ian. You went 10 times to carry out site supervision.
This was part of our method statement for looking after the tree throughout the development.
So you supervised the site then from the end of January 2019 to actually just before Christmas last year. So it was nearly 2 years.
10 site inspections over that period.
One of the things we did, though, Ian, is we really drilled down, forgive the pun, with the design team about every minute detail of working near that tree. And we looked really carefully at the foundations which were going to be piled. And I think there's a sort of misconception that piling is okay. You go between the tree roots and you can span over the tree roots. But actually, it's often a real issue with pile caps, which are big, chunky lumps of concrete sitting normally below ground on top of the pile. And we were really concerned about the size and location of a pile cap. So what did we do?
What we did was we looked at the depth of the roots that we'd found on the tree radar. We knew that the pile itself was going in between a tree root. That was moved with the consent of the engineer. He designed it to go between tree roots from the detections. We looked at the depth of the tree root and we realised there wasn't actually the volume of soil in which you could put the pile cap down underground. The pile cap is actually sitting partway in the ground, partway out the ground.
Yeah, we've got a photograph of this pile cap, which is in between parking bays. It looks fine. You wouldn't go, oh gosh, what is that?
The pile cap itself, because they'd had to make it above ground, they had to create a bay around it in the parking areas. They then looked at, if they have to make this sacrifice for the pile cap anyway, what else could they do to optimize the design? So they changed their other designs, and you have a series of pipes going up and down the structure of the building. So there's water going up into the building and drainage coming down into the building, and all going in at the same point or into the same bay that was created around this pile cap. It really has become a feature of the tree, and you won't necessarily realise exactly what it is at all.
When you did the demolition and removed those concrete pads, did you find the results you expected to find in terms of root presence?
When we did the removal of the concrete pads, it was very carefully dug down, but we had to have some very large excavators on the site during the demolition works. This turned out to be completely necessary. We found a couple of very small roots going across the top. We found 3 or 4 roots, around about the size of your thumb, going across over the top of it between the tarmac and the pile cap. But the bit that really was surprising was when these concrete blocks were removed from the ground, they were enormous. The concrete blocks themselves were, roughly speaking, the size of a Nissan Micra.
Oh my goodness.
These huge machines that were there to dig and demolish the initial buildings were really put to the test to try and lift out these huge concrete blocks, with me there saying, don't touch the tree roots. Further beyond the line of the concrete blocks, they were into the grass area where we knew there were lots of roots.
Yeah, no, that was really skillfully done. And other times you went there were for the external works as well.
I went there periodically over time to keep sort of talking through and meeting with the site manager. We were down there for the demolition works, when they initially started any kind of groundworks on the site, when they were putting scaffolding up around the new structure when it was to go up, when they were positioning the tower crane. All in all, I visited site over 10 times over the course of just under 2 years. We set out these points in as to when site supervision should be undertaken in quite a detailed method statement. And Assura stuck to that method statement very faithfully throughout the works. If there were any problems that were thrown up during the construction phase, they were on the phone to me. That resulted in a few tweaks for their designs where they'd made assumptions. But all in all, it worked out very well. The levels worked better for them than they thought. From experience of putting in new parking spaces near a tree, where we use specialist construction method to make sure the pressure from the cars doesn't compact the soils underneath, we've managed to put that in seamlessly against the rest of the parking area. All of these designs to accommodate the tree roots and to maintain the tree have really gone seamlessly into the building and into the development as a whole.
And also in the summer 2020, you actually went back as part of your site supervision and you had a really good look at the extension growth of the horse chestnut. And what did you find?
In the summer of 2020, they got the shell of the building up completely, and that included sort of several layers above the crown of the tree with a terrace. It was a fantastic experience to be able to go up and really look down into the crown of the tree. When we're looking at the tree, we're looking for vigour of the tree. As we've previously mentioned, there were a few conditions that the tree had, such as bleeding canker, horse chestnut leaf miner. And to give a good comparison as to how the development might have affected the tree, we had another horse chestnut immediately to the west. To try and gauge the vitality of the tree, we're looking at the extension growth, which is how much the tips of the branches grow in a year. Where it had been reduced was giving up to 10 centimetres extension growth in one single growing season, which was actually a greater amount of extension growth than the neighbouring tree. The only difference between the two was one had had a building next to it, but had this soil improvement, and the other one had been completely left alone. So what we can conclude from that is the building, rather than being a very negative effect on it, we knew it was going to be partially negative because we'd had to do works to the crown of the tree and take off the large limb. But by tailoring the building around the roots of the tree and then improving the soil rooting environment, it seems to have actually benefited from it.
Happy memories of a job done well. If only they would all go so well. And truth be told, it could have gone differently. if there wasn't that concrete barrier down the side and the tree was rooting into a grassy area which they were going to build on, we may have had to come to a different conclusion. So I think it's fair to say that the previous works of the developers of the Teen and 20 Club all those decades ago kind of made what was consented for okay. Would you agree?
Yeah, it's one of those projects there in normal times without having the experience of the radar and the previous site use. You wouldn't have been able to construct the new building and have the tree. It would have been a trade-off. You could have had one or the other.
Exactly. And also the fact that everybody was so open to all these technical details and the real care, because even with the fact that we knew we could technically retain a tree and build, things can go so wrong so quickly. Something that hasn't been considered, got to put a drain in, mate, got to do this, got to do that. All of that was completely covered. So a good news story.
I was very impressed with the construction team that were working on there, and as to how they worked with us to come out with such a good building that really works together with the tree.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time.
No problem.
I've been waiting for this.
Noel's question of the week.
Well, hi Ian. My question of the week is, let's say hypothetically I'm an ARB and I'm qualified and I've done bits and pieces, but I've heard this and I really want to get into tree radar. What sort of attributes do I need to have, and who do I contact?
Well, previously you went to Sharon. Sharon took me on as a senior consultant at a previous consultancy, introduced me to it. You've got to have the right way of thinking about things to be very successful in it. You've got to be quite stubborn.
Yes.
You've got to be scientific,
Ooh.
but a little bit arty at the same time.
Yay!
You need a really sound knowledge of tree health, how developments work. Working with radar, I actually developed a very good understanding of foundation design. And that's really driving things forward now, because I'm a lot more able to engage with the construction side of things. Some people get the hang of it relatively well. Other people will bang their heads against it and never quite get it.
So in summary, what you're actually saying is...
You could do the radar side of things, but then you'd need to develop the arboricultural knowledge and the sort of solid base to be able to translate what you can find with the radar into something that's presentable and useful to a client.
Excellent. That's fantastic. That's kind of answered it for me. And that was...
Noel's question of the week. Well, if you really want to go out on a walk, or if you're stuck on a cruise liner in New York, and if it's people we can't see while in this virtual reality, you may as well download an episode of Our Tree Lady Talks. Marvellous, yes. Marvellous idea.
Charlotte, Jojo and Danny.
Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Charlotte. You're mum to climate change warriors, I understand. Please introduce yourselves.
I'm Jojo and I'm the youngest. Because I'm 10. And I'm Danny and I'm 12.
Lovely. And tell me, what does River Lawn Green mean to you?
It's a very important place, not just for me or my family, but it's really important to everyone. It's not just like a random area with like trees in it. It's like it was planted by veterans of World War II to kind of keep peace, where people can be calm, go there to calm down, have fun. And I don't see it as just a small part of land. I see it as like a kind of like peaceful area that people can thrive in. And the fact that people are there, the council and other people were not taking it seriously and just not regarding it in that way, it was ridiculous, because the trees were planted as a sign of respect and just trying to spread the happiness and joy. And the fact that they're taking it down so quickly, it wasn't nice. It means quite a lot to many people.
Also, we need that space because it's quite close to the high street. So we need those trees to help suck in the carbon dioxide so the air doesn't get too filthy.
And I guess during lockdown, it's been a really good place to go, has it?
The main park's flooded at the moment.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, it's always it's a floodplain, so it's kind of been underwater for the last few months. So that's a lovely patch of green space now where you can still go and feed the squirrels, get a bit of a breather.
So when did you first find out that this horse chestnut tree was about to be felled, and how did it make you feel?
Me and my brother used to play football there and just go regular walks around there a lot, and we would just have a few, like, chase the pigeons, feed the squirrels, and we just use that space as it was part of us, really, because most of our childhood was spent there. But then the fact that we walked past it one day and there was like posters of like saying that this tree was going to be felled, it was one of our favourite trees in the entire Tonbridge. There's no reason, we just liked it a lot. So the fact that we saw it was going to be felled, we couldn't let this happen, because we had spent so much time in this area, and it was very important to us, and the fact that this was going to happen, we couldn't stand it.
In autumn, we spent quite a lot of time there because of the tree. It had beautiful conkers in it. The conkers were so big, and we enjoyed playing with them. And we played conkers with quite a few people there.
Yeah. We brought a few of them along to the they liked the area as well. We brought a few of them along to like the protest.
And did you tell your friends at school what was happening? Did you talk about it in the playground?
Yeah,
every few months there's like an event, like there's the Conker Championship event, Halloween party, there's the Christmas carols, and they're all just really fun. And loads of people attended them, helped give money to help try and save the tree.
And so what type of things happened around the tree when you were protesting? Because I think some of the things that happened were really quite special and fun, weren't they?
Well, we had big marches which attracted several hundred people, and then we had so we marched down the high street on one occasion, and then there's a big gathering of people to kind of listening to speeches as to why we should save the tree. And then we've had like Easter picnics and May Day event, that was really good fun.
Oh, yeah.
The Maypole dance.
Excellent. And Charlotte, how many people were involved approximately at these events?
And there's usually kind of 50, 60 people coming through and stopping for a little bit. And, they've got like crafts and teas and coffees, and it's just kind of quite a nice, fun family environment.
Oh, that's really wonderful. I had no idea when we were doing the analysis and writing the reports that hundreds of people were walking in the high street to save the tree. We were very happy with the outcome, and I know the developer was as well, but it was just something that was determined at planning. So that's absolutely brilliant. Did you make any new friends?
Yeah, it was kind of like a community. Like everyone, after like a while of protesting, we saw like the same people, and also new people came as well because they wanted to help at every event. And eventually we knew them. We knew the people around us more. It's like a community in a way. It's like a little kind of like town between us. But
the week that they were up the tree, that was a very special time, wasn't it? I think everyone who was deeply involved with that period, when Mark and Jade and Matt were up the tree, I think we kind of were taking it in shifts to guard the tree and to kind of keep them fed. And I think that was a really special time.
Now the tree has been saved, I'm guessing that you're really interested in nature and climate change, and I wonder what else you're up to.
We've been attending their yearly annual event, and we've taken on litter picking, and we've made our own page, litter pickers. We've also taken part in quite a lot of climate change protests, and we started some outside our school.
Danny, has this changed the way you look at the world? Do you feel that you can make a difference?
The fact that we know that we have helped prevent a tree from being felled and an area from being destroyed, it kind of gives us a sense of like we can do this, like confidence, and we've been spreading onto all the other environmental problems, and we've been trying to do the same kind of campaigning to try and stop other things from happening and to save different things now. But still, I think it's given us a sense of confidence. It given us a boost and feeling that we can do anything, which is good. And it means that we're also campaigning against litter, climate change. But it's not just trees now.
It's just having a bit of feeling that you can make a difference. It's really, really helpful, isn't it? So I wonder, what do you hope for the future, Jojo?
I'm hoping that there'll be a chain reaction of people helping the environment to help stop all of the environmental issues that currently. And
what about you, Danny? What do you hope for the future?
I just wish that like the possible extinctions and the devastation that climate change might cause. I just hope that we were able to assemble a team big enough to have effect, right, to affect the political sides of things. We want to try and affect the politicians and tell them to campaign more, because at the moment, I mean, some countries are doing some actions, but to be honest, not many countries are noticing it. But as well as that, I just wish there's going to be more companies that can create devices that could save the environment, like renewable energy companies and other companies like that that's helping clean the world up. And I just hope that we're able to have an influence on companies and politicians. I just wish we could just like change the course of climate change.
Well, no, I think that's a wonderful, wonderful hope. I'm feeling quite positive, about it. And do you know, one of the problems with actually making these changes happen, this might surprise you, is there's not enough young people coming into work in these sorts of jobs. In my job as a tree expert, there are not enough people coming into it. And it's the same with people who are experts in wildlife, ecologists, and also any sort of environmentalist. It's a job as well as being a passion. And I just feel so inspired by hearing you, and the difference it's made to you as a community is absolutely wonderful.
The main thing has been that for them, seeing that you can do something, people are willing to listen, and to kind of, it's spurred them on definitely to try and make a small difference where they are. And I think it is all down to the fact that the tree was saved, and that they kind of like, people go, oh, there's no point campaigning because it's not going to make a difference. But actually for them to be involved in this protest and to see people listening and changes happening, it's been incredible. It's been the most positive thing.
So thank you so much, Jojo, Danny and Charlotte.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for everything you did for the tree as well.
Thank you for doing tree taking the tree.
I've been sitting all night in a horse chestnut tree. Mark Hood.
It's so lovely to see you after, over 2 years. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you very much.
Tell us about when you first became aware that the tree was going to be felled.
We became aware that there was going to be development on the site back in 2017. We'd actually tried to book the building that has now been demolished, which is now the medical centre, for an event. And then we found out, having booked it, that we weren't going to be able to put on the event because there was going to be development across the site. And then we realised that not only was the medical centre going to be on its way, but also there were plans to develop the rest of the open space, which is next to it.
Right. And so I understand that you found out that a tree was going to be felled. What happened?
When the plans were published for the planning application, we realised that there were several trees on the site that just weren't on the final plan. So the alarm bells started ringing for us. The horse chestnut that we're talking about, I had a look on the maps, and it's been there for over 60 years. It's part of everybody's childhood who lives in this part of Tonbridge, because it's the best cropping conker tree. I used to live around the corner, and I live around the corner now. I moved away and then came back again. And it's much cherished by children. We were devastated when we saw that there were plans to fell it, and we thought that we could avoid this.
So what did you do?
First of all, we asked for the architect to change the layout slightly of the building so that the foundations wouldn't encroach into the space that the roots of the tree take up. That wasn't possible. And then when it came to the planning meeting, several of us made submissions about different aspects, including the tree. Our councillors at the time said that they thought the tree could be saved, the tree could be incorporated into an amended design, but they lost the vote, and planning and consent was granted. We had a campaign group called Keep Riverlawn Green. A few of us decided that we would take direct action. So when the men with chainsaws arrived, I was already in the tree. Basically, we managed to stall the felling of the tree, and we occupied the tree for 10 days.
And just to let the listeners know, this was the end of November, and I remember it being quite cold and wet at that time of year.
It was extremely cold and wet. It was unpleasant up there. We organised into shifts, so there would always be somebody in the tree, and then there was a support team as well. There were teas and coffees arriving, sausage rolls. We had an account at Nancy's Tea Rooms, which is over the green.
And you were all lanyarded in, so you were safe.
I've got a harness, and then we got another harness so that everybody who was in the tree safe. Yeah, so it was a real community campaign. Everybody came down, and we were collecting signatures for our petitions.
I just saved some photographs that are on Facebook, on the Keep Riverlawn Green Facebook page, and there's some beautiful black and white photographs actually, which we'll put on our website. And you became quite a spokesman, didn't you, for the group?
Local news came down, the BBC came and covered it, KMTV, which is our local television station, they came down. We got a lot of the other key figures also spoke. Danny and Jojo, so they featured quite heavily. We got lots of different perspectives.
And there was a turning point, wasn't there, where you had a meeting with Assura?
We were very, very nervous. Assura sent a team down. I think they're based in Warrington. Two of their top personnel came down to have a chat with us. And so myself and Paul Roberts went into the meeting, and we were worried. We'd been in touch with Assura on a daily basis. We had Paul's submissions as a arboriculturalist, and then we had architects had been in touch as well, pointing out that the layout of the building could be adapted in order to make sure that the tree wasn't affected at all. And unbeknown to us, Assura had been in touch with yourself.
I was really fascinated by the problem, and I did say to Assura, and I'm still in all spirit of fairness, that it could well go the other way. So our brief was to do everything possible that we could do to fairly look at whether or not the tree could be saved safely. And so we carried out a series of surveys. So when we were appointed, Mark, we were a little bit nervous of you.
First of all, we were delighted that they had obviously taken what we'd said seriously. Paul said, "This is great." When your name was mentioned and your consultancy, he said, "Well, this is great." Sham's one of the top names in the business. They're not just paying lip service here; they're taking this seriously. So this is the most we could possibly ask for. At least someone's going to come in and look at it objectively, and then if you said that the trees, the roots are all on one side, they're all on the side that the foundations are going to go. There's no way of putting piling in to save the tree. Then we would have accepted that.
We really got that sense as the impartial experts of open-mindedness from both parties. And in actual fact, as well as the science, the work that we did that saved the day, it was also the fact that when the Teen and 20 Club was built, they put a massive, great big concrete foundation along the line pretty much of where the new building is. And the tree radar showed very much that there were no roots apart from one small one that went over the top of it. So that was a big thing. And then it was working about how to boost the tree's health and how to prune it and look after it correctly. So moving on from saving the tree, I understand that this tree remained a focal point for the group and that you had lots of celebrations and lots of community activity.
We have. During the sitting, the occupation of the tree, we had one of our local Morris teams came and danced under the tree and blessed the tree. We've got another Morris team from nearby High Brooms called Brooms, Bricks and Bowlers, and they've come over and they've danced at River Lawn as well. And we have conquer competition. Basically, we crown the conqueror of all Tonbridge. It's really good fun. And then we've had May Day celebrations down there. We had a maypole brought down and professional callers. So we've had maypole dancing on the green. So we've had Easter events. It's been strange through lockdown because we haven't been able to be active. Normally we have Halloween at River Lawn as well. We have Easter, an Easter egg hunt. A huge part of our campaigning's just on hold at the moment.
Looking to the future, you're a Green councillor for local authority?
I am. One of our councillors stood down who'd been a supporter of the campaign. As this is my ward, I live here. So I stood for election and colleagues also stood. And so we've got 2 Green councillors in Judd Ward now. We're the only 2 Green councillors in the whole of the borough. It's a fundamental part of the reason that we were elected is to protect our green spaces and the green belt. And those 9 mature trees at River Lawn are much cherished by our community, and we want to keep them.
And presumably during lockdown, it's become even more important.
People really cherish what they've got. Tonbridge is a beautiful town, and River Lawn really is a place that makes it's so special for us. As the springtime really does develop, I think there's some bulbs that are about to appear as well. So there's some crocus and daffodils which are going to bloom to make it even prettier. So we're hoping that that will be something that we can build on in years to come to make it even more attractive for residents.
Finally, what does a tree mean to you? What does it symbolise to you, having gone through this?
To me, it symbolises the fact that you should never give up. We went to that planning meeting, and Peter Bolt, our councillor, and David Keir, his colleague, remonstrated with the planning officer and said, you're saying that this tree cannot be saved and it's not worth saving. Under normal circumstances, that would have been the end of the story. But we rallied together, and the tree was the focal point of the campaign. The utter euphoria when we came away from the meeting with Assura to get the reprieve for that tree was just incredible. The next year, when it came into blossom, to see those candelabras of horse chestnut blossom was like a resurrection. It was wonderful. It means the world to our organisation and our part of the town.
Well, I can tell you now that when we did all our calculations and worked with the structural engineer and to get some pile caps changed orientation, etc., I literally couldn't wait for it to go public that we've been able to save the tree. Because I could see on Facebook and Twitter that you were all discussing it. And I thought, I literally can't wait to tell you. As soon as we analysed the tree radar results and we mapped the branches as well by measurements, we thought, yeah, we can do this.
Yeah, thanks to your work in addressing the fact that the ground underneath the tree was so compacted. It's looking better than ever.
It's actually measurably better than ever. So Ian Lee has been measuring the extension growth of the tree and found that it's actually performing better than the neighbouring horse chestnut. Finally, in your role as tree saviour and Green councillor, what is your dream scenario? My dream scenario would be that every council partakes in having a green infrastructure register. In each and every ward, the councillors and the officers, the landscape officer, they work together and they map every single tree of note, every hedgerow, creating or providing habitat for biodiversity, so that there's a record there, so everybody can see exactly what there is. What troubles me is tree preservation orders only seem to really have effect in conservation areas. Now, I don't have a conservation area for most of my ward. I think every tree should have protection. We're well aware of the importance of meeting climate change targets, and we've got a 2030 climate change target here in Tonbridge Malling. And I think we're duty bound really to push on and to really have a record and know where we are. And so once you've got the record, you can build on that and measure your progress by increasing the amount of trees and the amount of hedgerows and the rest of the green infrastructure that goes with it. So thank you so much, Mark. That was absolutely brilliant.
Thank you very much, though. It's been great. It's been great to see you again.
Hit the subscribe button to guarantee you don't miss an episode, and you can follow us on
Twitter at the Tree Lady 67,
Instagram Tree Lady Talks,
Facebook Sharon Hosgood Associates,
or send an email to noel@treeladytalks.co.uk. Well, that just certainly shows what you can do when you all work together and try for the common good to do the right thing.
Yes, and it really worked in our favour for several reasons. It could have gone the other way. Firstly, the tree was healthy, much better than when it was first surveyed. Secondly, when they built the Teen and 20 Club, they made great big foundations, which means that the tree wasn't rooting where the new building's going to go.
Well, that's because of all those teenagers making all that rowdy noise back in the 70s, wasn't it? Now, I lived in Sevenoaks, you see, which isn't a million miles away from Tonbridge, and my elder brother picked up his first girlfriend at the Teen and 20 Club. I don't know where she was at, she was at a bus stop or something, I don't know. But anyway, the Teen and 20 had a huge reputation. But I mean, they built those massive concrete foundations, which in the end has really helped, hasn't it?
It really helps. So those two things really made it work.
And the glitter band, obviously.
Obviously the glitter band, but if the tree hadn't have been healthy, if we'd have looked at it and it had a disease, or it was really on its way out, then it wouldn't have been worth the effort.
No, because you've got to do both scenarios, haven't you? You've got to actually say, look, this could go both ways. But I actually think the Saving River Lawn group actually would have gone with you on that if it had been a decent technical information. They would have been quite happy with that. They just wanted to do the right thing.
Absolutely, and if we'd have found that the tree was rooting all over the place and the loss of roots and crown would have been too great, it would have had to go. And I just want to say this because we are involved with other cases where we've not been able to save the tree, all sorts of different reasons, and the intention is there to do the right thing. But this isn't a magic bullet, so this is a happy good news story.
But it's a great thing also that, you didn't have to go, as Mark said, down a different route. That was one of the puns that came out. There were 3 in this episode. I don't know whether you noticed it. I thought the question of the week was good. That was fun. And so next week, who have we got? What are we doing?
We have Julian Forbes Laird, who is a very well-known arboricultural consultant and expert witness. Now, he is a self-styled Jeremy Clarkson of Arb. And we're going to call this one And Another Thing.
Sounds controversial.
It's going to be very controversial.
Okay, shotguns at dawn in that case. Could be quite interesting. Could have heard the tree lady turning around to me and saying, no, you can't put that in, once or twice. And in the meantime, there's nothing else to say really. It's just, I suppose it's goodbye from me again, is it?
And goodbye from him.